All right, hello. Welcome to the time-lapse portion of this painting here that I did. It's kind of a personal piece, just kind of a fun little character I did, and it's based on the things I did in the torso anatomy study. And basically what I did is I took the drawing that I already did, and I was trying to remember all the things that I learned from the assignment. So basically I had the drawing, and I took a photo of that owl from the bottom left, and I put it behind, and I wanted to kind of move the colors around and keep it like pretty simplified. So that's why there's a very basic value group of lighting on the main character, a little bit in the background, a little bit on the top and bottom. So keeping it simple this way really helps, and I pretty much just flattened all those layers down. Well, actually just the line work onto the what's it called, the background there. And doing that allows me to use the mixer brush to blend in the edges of the shadows where they shouldn't be perfectly sharp. Of course, if you are in higher tier, you have access to the real-time version of this, so you can see all of this happening real-time. And so, yeah, I'll talk more about what's going on here. A lot of it ends up changing. I wanted to do like a fantasy character, sort of like hybrid of a human and some kind of creature, but it ended up looking more human anyway. But anyway, I'm being very particular with the value grouping. So if I'm going to put shadow shapes, I want to make sure that in those shadow shapes I don't put anything too bright, which is why it kind of works the way it does. That way it isolates the lights and the darks, and it's easier to read, especially at a thumbnail view. Now, I'm pretty much refining this as I go, and it's not like I want to commit to something perfectly right away. So that's why it's kind of just it's sort of an organic process, right? And so I start with the face mostly for the rendering, blending in the shadow sides that I made, and kind of moving my way outward, so like sort of concentric circles going outward and refining things. And as I go down, I know the forms of the muscles there based on the assignments from this term's, I guess, lesson, and I would put light or shadow on the forms because I know the wireframe of it. And then from there, if I put the shadow down, I blend the top side to show the transition from shadow to light side. It kind of has a nice effect, and we sort of read that as believable. Now over there, you just saw me make the background a little bit brighter. So basically I duplicated everything and on its own layer, and then made that layer really, really bright, and then I just erased out where I wanted it to be using a mask. The purpose of this is to redefine the graphic read of the whole composition, because before it was a bit too simple where we just had a bright light on the face, and then this one, after doing that, it creates more of a, I guess, dynamic composition of having content. You don't want to just have it too simple, I think. Well, I mean, you could, but the more complexity you add, I think the more exciting the piece could be. So that's what we did there. Here I'm sort of indicating different materials, like the metal there. It's not really that I used a metal texture or photo texture, but there was a brush, I think it's included in my brush pack, that has a bit of like rustiness to it, right? So I just made that really big and I brushed it onto the metal area. Here again, you can see me painting in the shadows on these masks and then blending in on the top sides, because I know that the shadows will transition, of course, to the light side. So it's going to be a blended soft on the top and then sharp edge at the bottom where the shadow is actually being cast. Now let me talk about the reference real quick. So I wanted to have like a more kind of native looking tribal indigenous type character or creature, whatever that thing is. So I'm pulling in references from tribal things, but mixing it also with kind of medieval armor. So you'll notice that I'm going to end up trying to put designs in the armor. Over here, where I draw on top of it with a new layer, I ended up getting rid of this, but it was something I wanted to try. And that's the thing about this. It's not like I go about doing this with a very specific thing in mind. Instead, I'm just starting something and then seeing what comes of it, and then making creative decisions along the way, rather than operating under the extreme pressure of trying to make it this perfect thing that you've envisioned in your mind. And yeah, so here you see me just kind of get rid of all that, but I think it was just a bit too, it felt too out of place and organic and swirly. But yeah, I really like tribal masks, so I included those, or kind of my take on them. down on his belt there. Yeah, and the thing is, it's like I like to suggest working big then small. So you notice in the beginning I did mostly big broad strokes, and then I zoomed in a little bit more and started refining, like, let's say, those value groups with smaller strokes. So I guess in the beginning it's ideal to start with a big brush. Here you see me sort of struggling with that axe thing. I ended up turning that whole thing into a sword, and that big circle in the background, I ended up just making it a moon, or like some kind of planet. It's probably like a moon or sun. And because, I don't know, it felt weird when it was attached to the weapon as if it was an axe. And so I just changed that to a sword. Yeah, so I think what you can do based on what we have in this terms package is, if you want to draw a bunch of different compositions of characters in different proportions and different sizes, but using the content in terms of, okay, we have a torso, we can bend it this way or that way, we can emphasize the size of the pectoral muscles, that kind of stuff, and then you go to paint it, you add on a texture in the background, some lighting, pretty much in the same process that we did here, and you'll pretty much get places pretty quickly. So yeah, and let me mention something about the sword there. What I did is I had it on a separate layer, like just as a selection, and I took the whole thing and I copied and pasted the entire image, and then I used a clipping mask into the selection of the sword to sort of fake a reflection. It's not really an accurate reflection, but it looks believable enough as something metallic. As opposed to trying to make a sword by making it silver or gray or whatever, because in a sense, something metallic is going to reflect things. So that's what I did. I pretty much took everything in the painting, reflected it into the sword, and now it feels like it's something that's believable and metallic. And that's something you could use to your advantage as well, not with just swords, but armor or shields, anything really. Yeah, and then as I'm going through this, I'm sort of refining areas that need more, I guess, smaller details. And then this is the point at which where I'm using a smaller brush, because if I try to use a smaller brush right away, it just, I mean, I'm sure you've been there where you just start putting too much detail right away, and you kind of want to make a bigger statement first and then start introducing detail, rather than the other way around. It's more like, imagine you're writing a book and you're trying to write all the details in the first chapter, and you don't even have the whole book planned, or at least some kind of outline. So think of it like you make an outline for your piece by making big, broad brush strokes and setting up areas. They don't have to be perfect. They could even be loose. But from that, it gives you the opportunity to go in there and refine, as if you're doing a loose, rough draft of messy sentences in an essay or a book, and then going in there and refining the words and the sentences, and that's where you start making decisions, rather than trying to do that up front. So here, I wanted to change the color of the mask before it was green, so I just duplicated everything since it was already flattened, and I shifted the whole entire painting to be more red, but then I erased everything but the mask. So it's kind of like an extra step that you don't need to do. I could have easily just done the same thing by making a new layer, setting it to multiply or color, and using yellow or red, but I don't know, just out of habit, I did it this way. I also did just make the mask down there brighter so that it's some kind of extra contrast down there, so that it's not just in shadow. That way, if you have multiple points of, like, let's say, contrast, of visual vibration, in a sense, putting light on stuff, then you can create a rhythm of focal points on the design, rather than just having a rhythm of focal points on just his head and then the moon and then the background, right? So yeah, you kind of want to find ways to introduce rhythm and in a sense, guiding the eye to go from one point to another to another. And it's like you as the artist have a choice of where to take that I guess path, and you can make it more simple, more complex. It's completely up to you. Here I made another copy of the whole thing, and I wanted it to be a little bit darker, and then that way I guess it just makes it feel more dramatic. I think I tried to bring it back up a little bit later on, but I was also imagining this as some kind of trading card, or whether it's Magic the Gathering or something. It's probably a bit more colorful and stylized than that, but it is, I guess, my attempt. But one thing that I'm going to say that's missing here at this point is multiple light sources. Right now there's only one light source, and it's mainly from the top. And this, while it works, it doesn't show enough form. And I think one way to increase the illusion of, I guess, three-dimensionality and form is to introduce another light source. And you're going to see me do that later on, where I introduce a cool light source on his leg, another like yellowish light source from the bottom as a sort of bounce light. And it's a great technique if you feel like your painting is flat and muddy. Give it a shot to introduce another light source and try to understand the form of it, so you know where the light is going to hit. Now, I'm sort of talking about that a bit too early, but giving you a heads up. Right there, I just put on a texture to sort of add noise and information. It ends up changing a lot at the end, but I do put it there just to sort of shake things up and introduce an opportunity to make more decisions. Because then you might like put in a photo or something and you notice something that you might not have thought about ahead of time. And again, that's kind of the creative process and trusting the process of, yeah, I don't know where this is going to go. Let's see what this does. Oh, cool. That looks like a cool pattern. Let's try that. And that's what I did with the legs down there. I made his beard a bit longer, and here's where I start introducing more detail in these darker areas. I had a lot of fun with those masks. I think I want to do more with that. And here I'm just editing the background. I haven't put too much attention to the background in this one. It's just very basic. And if there's a tip that I can offer, it's that to keep it simple, right? And so I had a simple, kind of arrangement of shapes back there, and then I introduced these textures, like it was like coal and ember and pretty much like burning fire. And it sort of just does all the work for me in this case, because I'm not too interested right now in painting the environment. I just wanted it to sort of support the feeling of the character. And so what I did avoid is making the environment background too plain. And so the idea here is to add noise, whether it's like texture or dots or speckles all around him, to sort of say, hey, the area we want you to look at is mostly on the character. So we're going to put noise and visual activity everywhere else to sort of distract you from looking there, so that you look at the character. Obviously, you're still going to look at the character because he's dead center, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, usually I flatten all these into one layer, but for the sake of the Patreon thing, I want to offer the PSD so you can kind of like click through it and see what's happening. So here's where I'm introducing more light sources. Now this is at least in this case, rim light from the right side, and this yellow. And I was going to keep it just warm lights, but I ended up adding a blue one later. And you also notice me flipping the canvas a lot back and forth. Now the purpose of this is so that I get a fresh eye and see if it's unbalanced or if it needs more work on one side or the other. And it's kind of a technique that most artists use. I guess back in the day they used mirrors for their paintings. So it's been a technique that's prevalent in the art world for a very long time. And if you have an area like you just saw me do there with the shoulder pad that you want to refine, then you make a new layer and then draw it out instead of trying to paint it without understanding what's going to happen. And here's that blue light. Now, right now it's kind of like a soft blue light. I ended up making it brighter later, but just look at it now. It feels like it has rounding of the form that you can sort of see on the other side of it, and it kind of comes out at you in a more three-dimensional way. It's pretty much what we're used to seeing in a lot of film. They call it three-point lighting, where you have like a main light on the top, a rim light on the side, and a fill light on the bottom. And that's pretty much three different locations where the object or the person or whatever it might be is going to receive light. And that's pretty much all I can say here. I think it was a pretty fun piece. I didn't have anything specific in mind, but just, hey, let me have fun with this, and we ended up with that. But the goal was to use the torso anatomy here. I think as a critique, I could have probably used more of a twisting motion of the torso, or a little bit more dynamic, but I think I kept it simple for this, for the sake of just giving it a shot, putting some color there, some texture and lighting, and we ended up with something like this. Anyway, so I hope that was helpful, and you know, for you, it would be cool to see what you end up doing with basically everything I talked about, from the anatomy lectures, going all the way back to gesture, to the mannequin technique, to composition sketching and all that stuff. So, all right, well, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.